Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of What's Driving Token Prices. I'm your host, Katie Talati, Director of Research at Arca. For those joining us for the first time, I'm responsible for identifying and analyzing digital asset and blockchain opportunities for Arca's funds. As part of our research, my team and I examine token prices and the market events that act as catalysts for price change. Based on our research and market events over the past week, here are some notable token price movements and what we think drove these moves. As a reminder, this commentary is not intended to be investment advice, investment research, or an investment recommendation. Please consult your investment professional for your own circumstances. All right. Well, it has been another action-packed week, guys. Some highlights outside of the token world that I would definitely want to touch on are first, over the weekend, kind of slid over a lot of people's screens, but maybe didn't get as discussed as widely, is that the CFTC actually won a ruling against a DAO called Uki DAO. So the worry or the kind of discussion point that people are talking about a lot now is that DAOs could potentially be held legally liable. However, in this specific legal case, Uki DAO didn't even provide a contest in court. So really, it was just the CFTC going after this entity. They didn't really provide a response or even engage. So really don't know what happened there. Another really interesting piece of news or thing to watch was that yesterday there was a hearing for between Binance and the SEC. Binance basically was fighting the court order that they'd received, or the suit that the SEC had put forward, saying, "Hey, we want to freeze all your assets, basically, until we can figure out what to do." So Binance US went to court. They fought that. The judge basically said, "Okay, come to some sort of compromise." So Binance says that they're going to continue to try to run their business as much as they can. Obviously there's been a lot of events this past week. We'll talk about them and jump right in. So to start, I've got for you a three-fer. But okay, so let's talk about Solana, Cardano, and Polygon. So following last week's legal cases against Coinbase and Binance, Robinhood announced on Friday it would delist these three tokens, Sol, ADA, and Matic. The tokens are no longer going to be available for trading, and users who do not remove these tokens by June 27th will also have their tokens automatically liquidated. Although there was no initial impact from the announcement, the market began to sell off in a big way Friday evening based on this news, with kind of dragging down a bunch of other tokens with it. Sol, 88, and Matic were kind of the worst performers. They're down on the week 20%, 16%, and 15% respectively. But between Friday afternoon and Saturday morning, they were down almost 30% each. All right. Next up, we got Curve. So Curve is a, we've talked about decentralized stable swap platform. So last week, there are three prominent venture capital firms launched a lawsuit against Michael Egorov, the founder of DeFi protocol Curve. So the three firms, Parify, Framework Ventures, and 1KX, claimed that they provided funding for the Curve project in 2020 prior to its launch, but never received their allocation of tokens or equity. The suit also claims that after accepting $1 million in cash, Egorov used that cash to provide liquidity on Curve in order to personally receive a large number of Curve tokens, which are now worth a small fortune. So the suits will likely take several years to play out, as there is another ongoing lawsuit regarding the same issue in Switzerland. To further complicate the issue, the three VCs that are suing are claiming things like that they gave away trade secrets and other information. There's definitely been some legal opinions coming back saying, hey, these aren't really considered trade secrets. But it's definitely a messy situation. A lot of people have been really highlighting the fact that Egorov made so much money off of, Curve protocol and being involved in the early days, because I guess it's been floating around Twitter that he bought a very expensive mansion in Miami in the last few months. Curve is down 19% on the week on this news. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about Polygon/Matic. So, Layer 2 scaling solution Polygon announced plans on Monday for its Polygon V2 upgrade, which is going to be rolled out in stages over the coming months. So Polygon didn't give a lot of details about what the V2 upgrade would include. It does allude to some scale, basically having a scaling scaling solution architecture that is similar to Optimism's OP stack. So the announcement was heavily teased on social media last week. A lot of people were potentially expecting an airdrop for their ZK EVM product. And they were maybe potentially disappointed when, it was just basically an announcement of, hey, here's a timeline of some future announcements we're going to make. Although the news wasn't as exciting as people were expecting, they did manage to really reverse the trend following the Robinhood delisting end of last week. And there could be, some positives on the horizon for Polygon in terms of its future roadmap. So again, Polygon was down 16% for the week. All right, last but not least, we're going to talk about Ripple. Okay, so obviously the market's been waiting anxiously for yesterday's release of the Hinman docs. So as they could have a material impact on Ripple's status as a security. So a little background information for people who have not been following this story, but the Ripple has been engaged in a legal battle with the SEC for the last year over whether XRP is considered a security. Years ago, in 2018, in the previous SEC administration, one of the SEC commissioners, Hinman, made a speech that stated that ETH was not a security. In the case of Ripple's case against the SEC, the biggest piece of evidence that they're using to say we are not a security is this Hinman speech. Now, the SEC has basically come back to them and said, hey, Hinman's views were just his own, doesn't represent what the SEC believes. And so kind of like there's been this ongoing debate as a result. So basically the Hinman documents were a release of emails and other information that Ripple pushed for the court, and the court forced the SEC to release. And basically the idea was that they thought the Hinman documents would kind of prove that XRP and ETH was not a security. So while the Hinman docs were released, they weren't as impactful as people were hoping exactly. They didn't, necessarily clear anything for Ripple. It was marginally positive, I would say. Basically, the documents say that, ETH is not considered a security. And that's kind of, a belief that seemed to have been shared between at least a few different departments within the SEC. So unfortunately, the jury is still out on, whether the SEC will decide if some assets are securities or not. But Ripple has been definitely outperforming the market. It is only down 2.9% on the week with this news. All right, that's all I got for you guys this week. Tune in here again next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific to hear what's driving token prices.